Hello and welcome to another episode of the Builders Podcast. I'm Lee, and today we have an exciting guest with us, Christian Kaunissaar, the Chief Technology Officer at Fibbl. Fibble is revolutionizing the way brands and online retailers create immersive experiences by providing photorealistic 3D models for augmented reality on all digital platforms. With their cutting-edge technology, Fibbl enables businesses to produce, distribute, and leverage these models at scale, enhancing customer engagement and transforming the digital shopping experience. We're thrilled to have Christian with us to share his insights into the innovative work at Fibbl and how they're shaping the future of augmented reality in retail. Christian, a warm welcome to Builders. How's it going?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Lovely to have you here as well. Christian, maybe you could start by sharing a little bit about your background. What led you to your current role as CTO at Fibbl?
Well, the long story is that it's always been I always had this technology interest in computers, interest in things. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate to get my hands on a computer when I was very young. So I was playing around with computers for the most part of my upbringing. Moving into high school, I was studying electronics and computers. Back then, computers and VCR was, pretty much the same thing. So I was studying how to fix VCRs and computers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then also, internet came into the world, and I started programming, building websites. I was totally shocked by that. I also have a big music interest, so internet was a good way to, spread your music, find music.
Right.
So I started building websites using what was available back then: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So that's how it started. Eventually, I was, leaning more against music, but eventually I found out that I will not conquer the world as an artist. So I went to university, studying informatics, computer science. Ended up in Stockholm in 2010. Started working as a developer, like a web developer. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I just jumped around as a contractor, doing a lot of different things, different markets, different roles. And like this startup thing has always been the thing. I've always worked with startups, and even on bigger companies, I've been working with like startup projects, that kind of stuff. And in 2016, I started at Flowbox as CTO.
Flowbox, okay, CTO. And this Flowbox is user-generated content, if I
it's a UGC company collecting a lot of content for from social media and make them available for different brands. So you can kind of, the typical case is that you go into a product page, like you're viewing a product, and you can see also other people wearing that product.
That product, got you.
Yeah, and I was a first employee, so I was also doing a lot of building of the platform, building, recruiting. Worked there for almost 5 years. Went from like 1 employee to 80 employees in 4 different countries.
Wow.
The tech team went pretty big. I think we were like 18, 20 people in the tech team when I quit. And then 3 years ago, I left Flowbox and found Fibbl. So yeah, that's how I ended up at Fibbl.
Super. And you were talking about the contractor type of work and everything like that in your early years, post university studies and everything like that. Were these all kind of web developer kinds of roles, or were you also managing or helping to manage teams of developers then as well? Or
It was in the beginning. It was web development. It was web development. It was almost always SaaS. I worked for some gaming companies as well. I think just one year after I started as a developer, I got a team lead role, like Scrum Master team lead role. I really enjoyed that. So that was kind of my the first time I start also working with people and managing people. And then I've been as a contractor. Sometimes I jumped around a lot of different roles. One of those were an architect role that was also like managing people to some degree, but also designing a platform from scratch.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was web startups, mostly SaaS. Yeah.
Cool. And this led you to found Fibble, you said, and that was it in 2019 then?
I was not actually one of the founders of Fibbl. So
right.
Yeah. So
when did you
Johan and
join
Henrik was
Fibble then?
was the founders, and they found me. And
got you.
I think the company they started like 1 year before I joined Fibbl.
Got you. Okay. And what gap was it that they saw and you saw naturally, since joining quite early on? What gap was it in the market that they were aiming to fill?
Yeah, that's for since e-commerce started, we have always seen like images. It's been images of products, and now the difference now is that it has emerged a lot of new technologies such as AR, augmented reality. You saw the virtual try-on stuff early in Snapchat, but we also thought that we can do this in a browser, so users can do it directly on the product detail pages instead of using apps. But it was the rise of, I think, the gap has always been there. We want to be more connected to the products. We want to see more details of the products. But now the technology is more mature. The technology is here. So that was what they saw. Like, okay, you can actually create 3D models quite efficient now, and you can actually use the 3D models to create new experience for customers in e-com.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but your customers essentially, their goals in using your technology, this kind of 3D technology, is to essentially mimic the offline experience. So like install, let's say, as much as possible online, right?
Mimic, but we also wanted to make it even better than the physical experience.
Right.
I think that is impossible, but there are cases where the digital experience using 3D is even better than the physical one. One example is my glasses here. It's very easy to try on glasses digitally. You just swipe through different kind of frames, like glasses.
Right.
Also, when I go to the city, when I take off the glasses, I can't see. But,
right.
When I try it on digitally,
That's a downside,
I can see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are some occasions where it's even better, but of course, we want to get as close as the physical experience as possible.
And to do this, what are the core technologies that Fibbl is using to create these photorealistic 3D models? I'm assuming we're talking 3D scanning. We've got computer-aided design, or augmented reality, of course. I mean, it must be a lot of different technologies that are being used here. Can you talk to us a little bit about these?
Yeah. So there is a lot of technologies. There's a lot of different technologies and services that we have been finding and using to create this end experience. First of all, it's the capturing of the products. It's like the right cameras. We built our own scanners as well. So the construction of our scanners is one important thing.
Okay.
We started out by renting photogrammetry robots used in museums. But they were not as fast nor as good as we wanted, so we built our own.
Okay.
And that entire pipeline from like the first like scanning the products to actually have a 3D model is just full of problems that you have to shoot down using different kind of technologies.
Right. So it must have been a really, really kind of iterative process where you were just like, hitting one hurdle, fixing that, another hurdle, fixing another. So just let me get it right. You essentially, you were trying out these products that were on the market, these 3D scanning products. Didn't think they were good enough. So you essentially built your own. You had your own hardware that was enabling you to create these 3D models. Is that right?
Yes, but we also use bought-in software to create the models.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But there is a connection of software that we have purchased or we have paid for, but also mixed with things that we have built ourselves into creating like a pipeline, production pipeline.
Got you. And what other kind of technologies go into the process? We've been talking a little bit about like the scanning and of like an input essentially, and then the output being these kind of 3D models. What goes on in between?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. So scanning is one thing, and then it's like producing the final 3D model, cleaning that up, managing the 3D models, distributing the 3D models. Then it's a lot of compression and file management, and making the original 3D model work for a web environment. So there's a lot of stuff there, and then it's also the experience, which is a totally own system, totally different kind of technologies. So if we start from that end, displaying the experience for the end users, we use 3ds, which is a fantastic framework for 3D rendering. Then we use different kind of cooperations to do the virtual try-on. We have built our own virtual try-on for glasses. So we
this is what you call the virtual try-on feature, right?
Yeah, the virtual try-on. You open your camera and you see the product on you.
Yeah, I tried it out. It seems really, really cool. Essentially, like enabling people to try on these products before, see what they look like on before they purchase, right?
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Nice. And yeah, you've been mentioning these kind of different technologies at different points. You could say, along the journey, if we call it that. What can you maybe walk us through how Fibble essentially was? The product. I mean, how it was kind of essentially built from the ground up. What was some of the key milestones, the key steps in developing the platform?
All right. So after if you take the step after we have the 3D model, say. So one of the key things, one of the problems, if we go in a problem direction here. Okay, let's say we have the 3D models, and now we want to make it available for e-commerces, not only the big ones with a ton of money, for like everyone. That was our vision. How do we do that? So one of the problem is the implementation. Then how do we actually implementation and the distribution of the content to our clients, to the web shops, so to say.
And this is essentially then the implementation is how the 3D model integrates into the e-commerce, the client's platform, essentially, right?
Yes. We had some cornerstones that we wanted to achieve in that. We wanted the client to do one implementation once, and it should be very easy. They should copy and paste a script into their page basically, to the the template for by example the product detail page, like one copy and paste one time. And the opposite is like, okay, you take one model per product, then you kind of match them. But we wanted to have a much more easier system, like one script, paste one time, and it should work even if we create more models in the future. It should just work.
Yeah.
So that was one problem that we want to face and solve. The other thing is like the matching mechanism, which is a big problem. Let's say that we have thousands of models in our database. The client has thousands of products in their inventory. How do we match them together? That's actually a big problem. So that was one of the problems.
And what is so problematic there, if you were to go into a little bit of detail? So let's say as a potential client, I'm someone with loads of different products that could, or types of products. They could be shoes, glasses, as you've mentioned, clothes, whatever it might be. And then the problem is being kind of matching those types of products to a specific model that's kind of more purposefully built for that type of product, right? Is that?
Yeah, but imagine if you sell. We have clients that have hundreds of thousands of products, and
Yes.
I don't think there is a single person on that company who knows every single product. And even if they did, they don't want to go into our platform and then search for them one by one and then connect them. So what we need to do was to integrate, our platform with their product inventory, scan their products and scan our models, and then match them, find which one are the same. So we build this kind of matching mechanism that firstly it's kind of scans all the products and all the models, try to match them together. Then we have an AI feature looking at the pictures of the products, trying to find the differences and which one are the same and match them together. So that was one of the big problems. So going back to the implementation, if you imagine the client journey, they send us their products, they implement the script with a copy paste once, and we integrate with their product inventory, and then they are set.
Got you.
We produce the models, we release them to our platform and make them available via our API. The script will pull them, and the matching mechanism will find the correct models and match them with the right products. So for a SaaS company, it's not our clients do not spend a lot of time in our platform working with Fibbl. It's more like a one-time thing, and it's kind of it's automated after that.
And it's that kind of accessibility to the load of the different models that you're offering them, essentially, right?
Yes.
And how then how is Fibbl kind of monetizing these technologies? You're essentially monetizing the 3D models that are used by the end client, or
we have a subscription model actually. So our clients subscribe to the models. We have a base subscription fee to use Fibbl at all, but then our clients pay per model per month. And they also pay per activation. And when I say activation, it's like, okay, if you were our clients' customers activate a virtual try-on experience, they pay per activation. So it's a combination of subscribing per model and also paying per activation. It's we didn't start out like that, but we ended up like that. We think it's a fair model. It's good for us and it's good for our clients.
Nice. And what about additional challenges, particularly kind of faced or that you might still face, presumably in like this kind of building phase of, particularly of these models? I can assume, there you've got problems such as like how, high accuracy or like how realistic the realism here in terms of when I try on a product, how real does it feel or how real does it look, for example? You spoke a little bit about the integration with e-commerce platforms, but what about this other? I assume it's a challenge. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about it.
It is a challenge, and it's still a challenge, even though if we go back like 3 years ago, and I kind of remember like the first models, I just, oh my god, they are so realistic, they look so great, can't be better than this. But if you compare those to the ones today, it's like a big difference. So I don't know how our models will look in a year or 2 or 3. It's like
Yeah.
But that's the problem.
And what is it that's made? Sorry, what is it that's made them so much more realistic or accurate today compared to say 3 years ago?
Yeah, so 3 years ago we used this scanners that we purchased. They were like generic scanning devices, not made for our cause. We also used a standard model viewer, like Google's model viewer that is available. We just use that together with this generic scanner, and we put the models in the viewer. It looked pretty good. But over the time now, we have built our own scanners using our own. We picked the right cameras and the right lighting. We are doing a lot of iteration, coming up to the recipe of our scanners, and we have done that also together with the end experience. So we actually built our own model viewer now. We're not using like a generic model viewer. We're using our own model viewer, our own light effects, and that has been like an iteration between like the production team and their work creating models, and the development team creating the experience. So it's they are made for each other, so to say. So everything is like we have pointed down details working from scanning to the creating and building of the model viewer. So that I think is the biggest difference.
Got you. I quite like the approach of when you're starting out, you obviously try something that might be whatever you want to call it, off the shelf or already available. But then you realize, maybe we could do this. We could build something better ourselves. So let's do that and try that. It's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, it's what you have to do as a startup, right? You have to take what is available and do something, get it out in the market, release something, and then you start improving. That's how you have to do it.
Yes. That kind of the lean startup approach, right? Yeah, I like it. But I can also imagine going back to kind of integrating with the e-commerce platforms. You're talking about matching and stuff like this, but I can also assume like this. Is there kind of a challenge regarding like ensuring compatibility with different systems? Can that be quite complex as well?
It's not been that complex, or it's always been the idea. It has to work on all devices, all browsers, all platforms. So we had that in mind. That was one of the requirements we had early. So we've always built it for that. So, and of course, there've been a lot of problems related to that requirement, but it's not been a big problem, I would say. And we're using quite classical technologies in the bottom. So, I always get this, question from clients: will it work on our platform? And before I even know what kind of platform you have, I say yes, it will. It's based on HTML and JavaScript. It will work.
Yeah. So that kind of cross-platform compatibility is secured, essentially. Nice. What about then scaling the technology? Any challenges you face there? I can imagine like the more users you get in, the more clients, growing number of users and models without kind of compromising on performance or quality. This in itself must be quite a challenge as well.
To some degree, but there are so much good technology in the cloud right now, so that is not really a problem. And also from the beginning, we had the focus on scale. We had the idea that we will produce tens of thousands of models per month, maybe. That's the end goal. So we have built it from scratch for the purpose, or one of the requirements have also been like it must scale. So if we think about the distribution of the content to the web shops, that will scale. It's like build for scaling. But then it's also producing 3D models, and that is a much greater challenge. Produce. We need more scanners, more people to handle them. More resources to handle that very complex thing of creating a 3D model. So that is that has been a challenge, and it still is, and it will still be. But we have good ideas, and we have a good recipe for scaling as well. So
got you.
yeah.
And talking about kind of scaling and resources as well, what's the what's the composition of the team at Fibble? Who are you? Your CTO, managing a team of how many people? What's the composition of the team there?
So the team consists of like marketing, sales. We have a fantastic production team that managing all the creation of the 3D models, and we have the developers, the tech team. And the tech team, it's very different from what I'm used to. If you compare it to, we're only 2 developers right now, which seems very few, but it's 2 very stable and skilled developers. So it's working very good actually. But I think and you need to have that kind of context, because if you compare it to like when I was working on Flowbox, I was building this tech team like organically. I hired one, I hired another one, and then you build the team. But on Fibbl, it's been totally different, and you know that we have been working a lot with Proxify and having a lot of temporary developers. And if you think about the journey, what we were doing 3 years ago is very different from what we do now. So we have been kind of bringing in different kind of skills, and when we are done, we kind of had a handover, and then some of them need to go. We used to have a designer. We set up kind of foundation for design, but when we were done with that, we let the designer go, and our web developers can kind of carry that on. And it's also startup life. You have to be
flexible, right?
Yeah, flexible and wise using your resources, right? So we are not a big team now, but we will definitely grow. We are recruiting as we speak, but it goes up and down. It's not like we have this kind of stable team that grows all the time. It goes up and down. It's a bit different, but it's been very, very good for us.
Got you. And I've seen Fibble essentially kind of positioning itself as a 3D augmented reality as a service kind of company, right? And I think I've seen some stats, I believe, on the website and other areas where kind of impact, or kind of like the kind of the result, or the kind of attraction for the clients really is kind of they're ultimately going to see X% uplift in add to cart, so the number of people adding an item to the cart, or X% increase in transactions or visitors to checkout, whatever it might be. What would you say so far has been Fibbl's biggest success story to date? So any cool stories that you'd like to share?
I think of the first real A/B test that we did with one of the clients. So when we started, this is green tech. There's no other, or there's not a lot of other companies like Fibbl doing what we do, providing the experience that we do. So it's a new thing. So we cannot look at other companies' success stories and say, we know it's working because of them. So we had to do trials ourselves, and when we were fortunate to get this great client, we also wanted to know what was the actual effect. Did it increase conversion? Did it reduce return rates?
Exactly.
Did it increase time on site? These kind of important KPIs. So we, together with this client, brought in a third party to do the client brought in a third party to do the A/B test. And it was, of course, very nervous. We kind of knew that we would have good results, but you never know.
Exactly. You still want to see it, right?
Yeah,
that social proof.
Yeah, but we did this A/B test, and the results was just fantastic. It was even better than we could expect. But one interesting part of that story is that the first A/B test showed that clients or their customers were not using the technology to a big extent. We had like the buttons there, like see it in 3D, try them on, but their customers were not using it. So that was the first problem.
Okay.
So after that, we did a lot of UX changes. We made the features more available and visible, and then we made another test, and just some small changes just increased the usage a lot, and then we got the real 3D test, A/B test, and it was very good, very good. We I don't recall exactly the numbers, but we had a great impact on the conversion rate, time on site, add to cart. So yeah, and after that we kind of made that a part of onboarding the client. So if you start using Fibble, you also we integrate with Google Analytics. That's one way to kind of give feedback to the clients of how well it's performing. So that's a big part of onboarding a client to Fibble. So also integrate with Google Analytics so you can see the result, and then we follow that up. We iterate with the clients to see if they can improve stuff until they have good results. And like all of our clients have just fantastic results.
That's super. So yeah, that was a question I was going to get to as well. As a journey, like from the very start for a client until they kind of sign up. I through whatever means or acquisition channel, I land on Fibble's website. I end up converting, so signing up to this subscription based model that you were talking about. And then when I'm in, I have this kind of this user interface where we're looking at a vast number of different models, but you're also hands-on, would you say, in kind of supporting the customer and kind of getting things set up and the analytical side of things like you were just talking about?
Yeah, so basically you can do everything without us. So the platform is built like that. So if the client don't want to talk to us, they don't need to. They can actually onboard themselves. We have that has also been a requirement from the beginning. So it's all built for that. But we do have like customer success managers. So every client that joins Fibble gets a dedicated customer success manager that helps them out, making sure that they set up the analytics part. We also help them with our experience, because we have been doing this for 3 years now. We know what works the best. So when the clients start, they may have ideas how they want to integrate 3D AR on their website, but we can see and we can give them some advices. So we also do that. So we have this kind of onboarding meeting with them, come with suggestions. This is how you should integrate it. This is how it should look. This should be the look and feel from our perspective. Then it's of course the client's choice, but we give them advices and we do some help.
And how are you and the company? How's Fibble kind of staying ahead of the curve with like all these kind of advancements in 3D technology, customer preferences as well? How do you guys try to stay ahead of the curve and experiment and improve?
Good question. We always try to do everything better. The end experience. We always have ideas of okay, now we are at this state, we're really happy, but these small details can be improved, and we always work on those details. So it can be, and it's adding small features, but it also improving the features that we already have. That's consistent work that we do. It could be changing
and a lot of feedback from your clients as well. Sorry, go on. A lot of feedback from your clients as well.
Of course. Their opinions is gold for us. They are a big part of changing and developing the product.
And in terms of leadership, you've spoken about your team, or the number of developers being 2 at Fibble. You had a significant number at Flowbox. I'm a little bit interested in as to kind of how your previous experiences, prepared you for the work you're doing at Fibble, for some of the challenges that you've said you've been facing? Of course, it's a different product that you're working in now, but there must be some kind of these transferable skills that you've taken from previous roles and that you're now able to use at Fibble.
Yeah, for sure. So tech wise, there are some things that are very alike when it comes to Flowbox and Fibbl. So Flowbox was also a third-party content provider for ecom. So I've taken a lot of experience, of course, from that. There was also like this kind of script thing. You copy-paste the script, that kind of ideas goes in. It was a SaaS platform. So, managing content. The big difference, I would say, is that we are creating our own content. So I didn't, have to rely on a third-party API, which is a blessing. I love that. I'm so happy I don't have to do that anymore. Yeah.
Nice. But I mean, also every journey does have its ups and downs, right? I'm interested to hear a little bit about any kind of failure or kind of particularly tough day, let's say, that you've experienced at work, and kind of what did you learn from that experience? How has it maybe influenced your approach to leadership or indeed to kind of technology?
As a developer, I had a couple of those days, where you do mistakes and things break. That's I think for most developers that is the reality of the work. But what I think about is it's actually back on a previous company. We had this analytics feature, and I come to work in the morning and I see the aggregation have failed. Like the aggregation to create the analytics KPIs, it has failed. And we start looking into it, and we see that okay, this is not going to be a quick fix. It's like the foundation of the aggregation is not good enough. We like built it in a quite naive way. It was doomed to die. So that was a very bad day, and the coming days, the following days was even worse, because we got into this aggregation debt. The aggregation was failing, and the problem is just getting worse, and the KPI was like empty, and the clients couldn't see them, and the stress was growing in the team.
And they're just bombarding you with messages or complaints.
It was horrible. It was horrible, and we couldn't just not fix it. We have to rebuild stuff. So it took a couple of days. It was and one thing that I learned is like when the shit hits the fan and you are really need to do stuff, good teamwork can actually solve problems very, very fast. So that was the big learning from that. It took like a week or so, maybe a little bit more, to get it working. The second thing that I learned is like, okay, I learned a lot about technology and databases, of course. I also learned that it's a good thing to build stuff fast to get it out, so you get your MVPs, but you can't leave it. You need to do maintenance and prepare for the future. That's of course an obvious thing, but you have to actually look for those problem hard.
Not just kind of maintaining it, but making sure it's if you're not advancing it, kind of making sure it's future proof as well, obviously. If it's a feature in use, of course. But no, it's interesting. I really, like I said before, I liked your kind of approach to building things yourselves, if you think that makes sense, and you can do it better than the products that you're already using. But I also like the approach of failing fast, some people say, or kind of not being afraid to fail, essentially, and learning from it, as opposed to kind of crumbling. But the flip side, obviously, I don't want to focus too much on failures. What would you say is the kind of biggest success in your career so far? We've been talking about success stories at Fibble, but what about in your own career?
Well, my first job as a CTO, getting the opportunity was a big thing for me.
At Flowbox, right?
Yeah, at Flowbox. I don't, when I think about the first month of that time, I was kind of, very focused on making it work. I didn't take anything for granted. I didn't see that, okay, now I have this job and I will have this job for 3 years. I have to succeed, I have to make it work. It was also a bootstrapped a startup, so we had to make a product that sells. We have to earn money, and that was a big stress. I also have to recruit good people, and I think like after 10 months, a year, when I felt, oh, it's working, we're actually making money. We have we have a good team, and they like working with me. No one thinks I'm an imposter. I'm not fake. It's
Right.
actually working.
Right.
That I think was like, I remember as like a good success for me. But that's how it is in working with technology. It's not one day, one thing that happens. It's like when you release something, it's like, yeah, we released it, but is it going to work? You always have this kind of, we have to,
exactly.
The pleasure is delayed,
Just waiting for the bug reports to come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But how did also interested to hear kind of how being CTO at Flowbox differs to being CTO at Fibble. Obviously, they're different companies, they're different products and everything, but there's a lot that can kind of there's a lot of kind of that can be the same essentially across both both companies presumably. But I'm interested to hear kind of, was it like being a CTO now, 2024, to what it was when you started at Flowbox, for example? You mentioned it was 2016, right?
Yeah. But
What would
one
you say
difference
the
is the market.
key differences now?
The market now is a lot worse. That's one minor thing, but the biggest difference is that I know that I can, I have a lot more experience and confidence in that. So thinking back,
you've been in a lot of those situations before, essentially, that you might be facing on a daily basis. Yeah.
So thinking back at the like first years of Flowbox, they are very different from Fibbl, actually, and it's based on experience, and also the team we have on Fibbl. It's our founders have done an amazing job finding this super professionals. So we have an amazing team on all the like different kind of sub organizations in the team. So while Flowbox was like, it was me and the CEO kind of building it together over time, we quite early got a very competent team on all sub organizations. That has also been a very big difference. Yeah.
And what would your kind of tip or kind of recommendation be for kind of finding, and not just finding but retaining like these top talent? Essentially, you talk about finding the right people for these teams. What would your tip be there?
If I think about all these years, you need some luck to find the good people, or you need to talk to a lot of people, and I have certainly done that. Talk to a lot of people, get the good process for screening. That I would say is very important. And when you get the good ones, try to stay out of the way. Don't try to micromanage them, or see them, see what they are good at, let them do what they are good at, and try to see them on what their requirements are, what they need, what they enjoy, and try to provide that for them. I would say that is important.
Key motivator, essentially. Yeah. Good. And moving on, then, I'm also really keen to hear your thoughts on the future of 3D, of augmented reality, virtual reality as well. How do you see these technologies, which are really, really core to Fibble's future? How do you see these evolving over the coming years?
Yeah.
I personally think I've said on other episodes before, I think, when it comes to areas such as AI and everything, I think it's quite scary to look too far ahead, of course. So I'm just interested to hear what you're thinking in terms of these core technologies for Fibble and how they might evolve over the coming years.
From a Fibble person's point of view, we think that it's gonna e-commerce is ready for it now. The technology is here, so we're going to see a big transition for web shops. Instead of looking at static images, you're going to interact with the products. You're going to see them in full detail in 3D. So I think that is the big change. And if you look in steps, you're going to see like static products first. And then when I mean with static products, I mean things like shoes, like bags, like jewelries, like things that are stable. And then the next step will be, more dynamic products like textiles that moves like this, that is much more dynamic. That is a big challenge, but we will get there eventually. So that would be maybe the next step. And then we will see what happens with hardware and devices. I think it's going to be part of everyone's world eventually. We're going to have digital assets mixed with our own reality everywhere soon. I'm just waiting for glasses with built-in AR features like eye lenses. Exactly. Who knows what will happen? But that will be that's a lot further, of course. But yeah.
We're already seeing it in the kind of professional context as well. I mean, this and being in retail as well is a super interesting future. But we're seeing this kind of AR and in the professional context, VR as well when it comes to gaming and stuff. So I think it's super exciting. But what's your view also on what this might mean for the future of kind of offline or kind of physical shops on high street, stuff like that? This is nothing like new today. This kind of digital bringing the experience online has been happening for some time. And yes, some companies close those kind of the physical shops or stores that they have. But do you see a future where it will be so prominent and such a the kind of normal way online that these kind of physical stores will not exist at all in the future? Or what's your view on that?
Probably. I think that is going to happen. We have already seen that. E-commerce, purchasing product online has become better, even though the content has been the same for the beginning of e-commerce. But how you purchase online has been improving a lot. It's very simple. It's very easy today to just go online, purchase. You maybe purchase a couple of different kind of sizes, and you send them back. It's like myself, I prefer doing my purchases online. I don't like to try out clothes.
Same here.
I don't like it. So those kind of stores will probably go away.
Yeah, I don't remember, to be honest. I don't remember the last time I purchased in store. To be honest, I feel both bad about that as well. But I can't remember the last time it was. But how do you envision Fibble's role in the future of kind of AR and VR? What kind of additional opportunities or challenges as well do you foresee over the coming years for Fibble?
I think the scaling, we're into that. We've been talking about that, but scaling is I think there is a tipping point soon where everyone selling products online want to have AR 3D, and I see this like big swift in scaling from like creating 1,000 models per week to tens of thousands models per week.
Right. Yeah.
that is, I think, one big challenge that we will see. Yeah.
And is that then, a key kind of focus for Fibble moving forward, that you're kind of set up for, to be able to kind of help your customers, manage that
Yeah,
at that scale? I mean, yeah,
it's a big part. It's a big part of what we planning for and working on today.
fantastic. And Christian, yeah, before I wrap up the episode, is there anything you want to add?
I don't think so. It was a really nice interview. I enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise.
Please, the viewers of this, go into Fibble.com and look at what we are doing. Yeah, that's it, I think.
No, yes, I agree, and also repeat that. I was in on your website as well. Like I said, trying on this kind of virtual try-on functionality, which was really cool. And I've seen it on a few e-commerce websites as well. It's actually quite a cool experience. When I've been online over the past few years. Obviously, you see the product online, you get it home, you try it on, but you haven't tried it on before that, right? And you sometimes see videos of these models, right? Modeling the clothes and how it might look on you. But then these kind of these immersive experiences that you're kind of creating for people is actually taking it to a whole new level. It's really cool, exciting. So yeah, I encourage everyone listening to also try this feature out. Super cool. But yes, Christian, thank you. This brings us to the end of another episode of Builders. Like I said, a massive thank you, Christian, for joining us today and sharing your journey, your expertise in the world of 3D and augmented reality.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, please, to check out Fibble and follow Christian and the team's work over at Fibble.com, Fibbl, that is. And until next time, this is Lee. And please stay curious, keep building, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.